the less human interaction with the data, the more reliable your data is going to be. We can't verify a black box.
That's Derek Markoff, an independent GHG consultant with more than 20 years of verification experience at LRQA, one of the world's leading assurance and inspection firms. And that line is going to become more important the faster AI assisted tools enter the carbon accounting workflow. Because here's the problem: tools that automate calculations can't always show how they arrived at the answer. If a verifier can't trace the logic, they can't sign off. And as Derek explains, that's not a future concern. It's a constraint verifiers are already navigating right now. In this conversation, we get into what patterns emerge after verifying inventories across dozens of industries, why baseline year recalculation is the most commonly neglected requirement in the GHG protocol, how inventory management plans separate programs that survive staff turnover from ones that don't, and what the automation wave means for practitioners who want to stay verification ready. I'm Aaron Stainthorpe, and this is the Carbon Management and Accounting Podcast. If you have questions, comments, or a guest suggestion, you can reach me at podcast@northstarcarbon.com. This episode is brought to you by Northstar Carbon and Impact, the carbon and sustainability management platform built by sustainability professionals for sustainability professionals. Northstar helps companies simplify GHG accounting, improve data quality, and stay audit ready across scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions so teams can spend less time reporting and more time driving real impact. Here's my conversation with Derek Markov.
Welcome to the Carbon Management and Accounting Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Stainthorpe. This podcast is brought to you by Northstar Carbon and Impact, the carbon and sustainability management platform built by sustainability professionals for sustainability professionals. Northstar helps companies simplify GHG accounting, improve data quality, and stay audit ready across scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions so teams can spend less time reporting and more time driving real impact. Today, I'm joined by Derek Markoff, previously America's Climate Change and Sustainability Technical Manager at LRQA, and now an independent GHG consultant. Derek has over 15 years of verification experience spanning dozens of industries, from manufacturing to agriculture to energy, and he's built his consulting practice in a way that allows him and his wife Kathy to work from anywhere in the world. They're full-time slow travelers, spending 1 to 2 months in each destination while Derek continues to conduct verifications and advise clients remotely. It's a fascinating example of the non-traditional career paths available to GHG specialists today. If you've ever wondered what patterns emerge after verifying industry inventories across wildly different industries, or how to structure a GHG consulting career that gives you the freedom to work from anywhere, this episode has the answers. Let's dive in. Derek, thanks for joining me today. To start, can you tell us about your role leading verifications at LRQA and your transition to being an independent verification consultant?
I'm really excited to be here with you today. Yeah, I was at LRQA for like 22 years, and I held multiple management responsibilities there over the years. I ran our team in North America, of our team of verifiers, and kind of ushered the business through where it just was GSGs and then expanded it into ESG and all that stuff along the way. There was a period where I oversaw all of the Americas. I went over to the technical side and oversaw our management systems for a while. But all along the way, I had a foresight of wanting to become an independent contractor because that is something that happens readily within LRQA and other businesses like LRQA. So my wife and I always had this vision to travel the world. We built our relationship early on travel, and we traveled with our daughter a lot. And when she went off to university, we launched out into the world again.
Diving into carbon accounting, I wanted to start by asking, having verified inventories across such a wide range of sectors, what patterns do you see? And do you see fundamental challenges with GHG accounting as universal, or does each industry have its own unique pain points?
For the most part, one of the kind of humorous ones that I always say is a pain to clients while we're in the midst of it is the smaller sources are the biggest pain. And that's a commonality. And I think it could be a surprise for organizations who are getting into this for the first time because management systems for businesses are built to manage the larger sources for other business purposes like costs or whatever. And so when the world of GHG gets landed on the environmental engineer's table or something, they find that they have to like chase all these little things that didn't matter to the business before. One of the tricky parts might be, nitrogen fertilizers. But then nitrogen fertilizers are a core part of the business. So you guys already understand how to like apply the right amount of nitrogen and then why because of the chemical interactions which lead to the process emissions, so that's already built into the business. Similarly for energy, there's all kinds of complex engineering calculations that are needed because of the fuels that are used that are not just like diesel or unleaded. There's all kinds of fuels used in the business and other reasons where engineering calculations are required a lot, but again, they've got the engineering resource base in spades. And so they've got these engineers who can just crank those things out.
I wanted to also ask you how you think about data quality. Oftentimes, when people are doing inventories, we're looking at different sources of data, primary data versus secondary, spend based versus activity based, supplier specific versus industry averages. When you're working with a company, how do you help the company, the clients, or even yourself understand the trade offs between data quality and the resource investment, and when you might want to prioritize one data source over another?
It's interesting as a third party verifier, we always have to be careful not to consult with our clients, but we also are able to support our clients. There's a different way of communicating. It's telling them what they can't do and then they go figure out what they can do. So, through that process, one of the main things that I'll explain to a client in regards to like the trade-offs of using activity data versus estimated or whatever they feel like they need to do that's not the best. A lot of companies are not really in it for the right reasons. If they are, and they really set targets they want to achieve, and they're working towards those targets, using estimated data or industry averages, it kind of removes all the levers they have to make reductions. And most of the others are not working towards targets. So they're just like in status quo.
Derek, you would say that's true both for industry average and probably oftentimes for spend based accounting.
For spend based accounting, you are stuck with averages. And in that case, it's not even industry. It's like, across the board. Everybody who buys paper from somebody in the world has the same factor. But on the scope 3 side, there's some interesting tools that are coming into play that are spend based. And CDP has services they provide to their members to get access to intensity metrics for their suppliers. So, for instance, like if company A is buying steel from company B, they can go see that company B reported to CDP, and company B reports their emissions and also their revenue. Now you've got the two parts of the equation for an intensity metric that can be used for that company. And so that's exciting because then company A, they can go look at the different intensity metrics for all the steel providers in CDP, and then they've got some leverage. So I think we're just starting to see that come into play, and that's going to hopefully give reporters a lot more opportunity and through the market mechanisms incentivize the suppliers to clean up their act because they might not be high on the list of somebody who really cares about, all the 10 options that they can pick from.
What separates organizations that excel at GHG accounting from those that struggle? Do you oftentimes see that it's resources, expertise, leadership commitment, the internal systems? And do you see ways that a mid sized company with limited resources can still build a solid verification ready inventory?
Well, first of all the items on your list are important for having a good GHG accounting system in place. But I do think that the critical one that needs to be in place for any of the others to really come in is leadership commitment. It takes leadership to hire the right people, to send them to the right trainings, to give them, role profile that includes this in it. Again, like I said earlier, like some organizations are not in it for the right things. You can kind of tell early on if they just feel like they have to submit to CDP because they want to get their rating up or whatever. On to your second part, I do think mid-sized companies can totally get in and do this right and do it well, especially if leadership's behind it. With less resources, less revenue to work with, less personnel, I'd say that the suggestion there is for them to get started well before they really want to like roll out their inventory and then therefore have it verified. The verification usually comes after 2 or 3 years of working with an inventory, and they know that they need to iterate on it year on year to get better and better and better. And then giving the responsibility to take that project through to more than just one person so that there's kind of some iterative work going on to build this for the organization.
On the flip side, from thinking about best practices, I wanted to ask about common mistakes that you still see today. And looking for patterns across all these inventories, are there common mistakes or gaps that you see that continue to happen, especially things that you think would be easily remedied? And if so, if there's some common mistakes that you see, is there any advice that you'd give to sustainability professionals to try to avoid those common mistakes?
Emission factors for certain source types are changing all the time. Sometimes it's every year, like for utilities. When it comes to fuels like diesel or unleaded, that doesn't change as frequently, but every now and then that does change too. So just keeping an eye on the emission factor update is often a mistake that we see. A reporter has not updated their emission factors as frequently as they should. And so we'll give them a finding and they have to go out and apply those to all of their sources. A lot of our time is spent in spreadsheets. Even if there are tools out there that people are using, it all comes back to spreadsheets at some point, whether it's before it goes in the tool or after it comes out the other side. Even with the tools, we find issues in there. And so then we'll have a client where we have to give a finding to the client that is actually like a pass on to their provider of a service to manage things for them. And then, it goes through hands a couple ways with all these standards over time, like some of the requirements of the standard don't get as much attention early on as they do as the whole process of reporting has developed more. Um, and one part that has at LRQA, we've been giving a lot of attention over the last 3 years and even more. I mean, a lot of clients were already doing it, but we started like nailing it down is reporting the base year and having a base year recalculation policy. And this is really important because at the end of the day, all organizations are supposed to be going towards setting targets for reductions. And if the base year, which is the beginning part of that trajectory towards meeting your target, is not accurate, then claims of targets are false or erroneous. And so there's a part in the GHG protocol, chapter 5. It helps create an apples to apples comparison from the base year. If there's been a lot of acquisitions or divestitures over time, you have to adjust the base year so that you're really doing an apples to apples on your way towards the target.
Can you remind our listeners, is there a specified criteria in which recalculation is necessary, if like a certain percentage change or certain things that are material? And then a follow up, which I'm not sure if you can speak to, but I've seen issues in the past where there's the GHG methodology, but trying to work with your internal stakeholders to explain recalculating the base year can sometimes be hard. And that goes back to kind of a leadership question about, this is iterative. So things change over time, but it sometimes can be hard from a leadership position to try to explain a calculation, a baseline readjustment.
I'll back up a second and on your second part and say that this may not have been a focus point of verification in the past, whether it was with another verifier or even with the same firm that's calling it out more now. And that can be frustrating for management and leadership. But in the world of management systems audits, which a lot of the firms are that do this, LRQA, DNV, BV, we're auditing clients for all kinds of things, aerospace, medical, devices, quality, and all this stuff. And so it's understood, like I said earlier on, that every part of the standard is not hit on every time. And you can think about it here. The leniency here was given early on because people weren't nearing their targets. But once people start nearing their targets, you really got to nail this down. So then we have to work with the client to explain to them the logic of it, why it's important. And that's our contact that then has to explain it to upper management. This is why we're going to have to put this whole new policy in place that's official that we have to follow every year. And this is also why we might not hit our deadline. But then what needs to be done? It's usually acquisitions, but it can also be methodology changes. Like if they went from using spend base over to emission factors, that would be a trigger because now you've got a whole new methodology that you're using. You think about it this way: if you're using the best paper from the most, you know, earth conscious company out there, and it's all recycled to the 10th degree, they can show reductions instantly from just changing from that spend based general factor over to this clean paper. And there could be an argument for that, but there's not a history to show that they weren't using that same paper the whole time.
I wanted to ask about the systems that the team should be developing internally, and particularly thinking about inventory management plans and transition or succession within a sustainability team. Very oftentimes, the person who builds the first inventory may not be there many years later. And so, from a verification perspective, what institutional knowledge needs to be documented versus what can a new sustainability manager usually figure out? And what systems or documentation have you seen that really survive turnover that can be very natural on sustainability teams?
At the end of the day, management systems for an organization are the part of the organization that ensure quality over time and ensure that there aren't going to be any non-conformances or legal issues that come up over time. And in the other parts of our business, it's that have been in place for 20, 30, 40 years, like these standards, like ISO 14001 for environmental, ISO 9001 for the quality of the widgets coming off of the production line. If the buyer wants to know they are guaranteed to have, or it's very unlikely they're going to have a flawed product that they're going to buy from company B, they want to know that they have a QMS system, a quality management system in place that's going to ensure quality. And then when firms like LRQA, BV, DNV go in, we're looking at their systems. We oftentimes don't get into the data. We just want to see all the policies, procedures, the training manuals to make sure that all these parts of the business are ensuring the goal of whatever that standard is going to be achieved. And so the environmental space has been there for a while, and that's like preventing spills, making sure that toxics aren't showing up in products or into the environment. But then when you go into the niche part of environmental, GHG accounting, the focus on the systems has not been as robust as it could be. If it's voluntary, I'll say if it's a regulatory requirement, almost all regulatory programs require reporters to have an inventory management plan in place for good reason. Like I just said, they want quality data. But if it's voluntary reporting, which in North America, up until now, it's going to change soon with California. A lot of the voluntary reporting is relying on these standards, GHG protocol, ISO 14001. In there, these are not shall statements to have an IMP in place. They're should statements. Like it's smart for you to do, but you don't necessarily need to do it. So it's a long explanation of I think all reporters should have an IMP in place. Now, we as a verification firm can't require them to because it's not a shall statement, but we always recommend it to clients to get an inventory management plan in place because it is the management system, which the rest of your business relies on for all kinds of other reasons. This part ought to also.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting thinking that part of the recommendation is it would help to go from should to shall.
And what will probably happen with California, it's all uncertain right now, but they're leaning on the GHG protocol that is being litigated by some firms right now. What they did in the past with the cap and trade rules and stuff is they took the federal reporting rules and they modified them. And what's probably going to happen with California is they're going to say, we're going to use GHG protocol, but you also need to have an inventory management plan in place. So there's a good chance that that's going to unfold over the coming years, as well as like other little tweaks to the standards that everybody's used to.
And so that's the zoomed out perspective. Zooming back in, I take from this that you would say successful transitions across team members, it really is going to depend on having an inventory management plan. And because things have been voluntary, not everything's been documented in this standardized way that we see with other quality control and standards. And really moving towards that, that ensures that you have consistency across team member transitions.
I mean, an IMP is what is recommended in the standards. Baby steps to get there again. Like you can iterate all the way up to a full IMP. But if you start there, it's essentially just a structured way of designing your policies and procedures that govern what the employee is going to do, where they're going to find the information, who's going to help them, and things like that. And then they can structure it like an IMP in order to like make sure all the parts of the standard are being addressed as well.
I wanted to transition from this question to talking about technology and automation. Right now, we're seeing an evolution from spreadsheets, which you mentioned are still used with a lot of tools, even if it's going through a software package, to more software and even AI assisted tools. I wanted to ask what role you think software should play in inventory management and where you've seen automation provide benefits right now versus where you think human judgment is actually still pretty critical in terms of interpreting the data. It's probably a mix, is my guess, but it also feels like this is a rapidly evolving space.
In the beginning, it was all spreadsheets. I've been doing this for, like I said, over 20 years. And I shared with you a story. I'll just do it really briefly. There was a point where, like 15 years ago, a client was using all these spreadsheets, and there were all these different versions where it'd have to transpose from one to the other. I shared with the manager of this team, look, like the less human interaction with the data, the more reliable your data is going to be. And it's true because you just see like typos. So I would say that finish that story briefly. I cycled back to that site for this client year over year, and last year they came up and they're still using spreadsheets because the manager didn't want to let his people go, you know. So that's the older part of the story we're all hearing about with AI, and he's persevering so far. But that part of the systems, I do feel, and I hate to say for some of the employees, that when those transpositions can be handled by automation, like having one reporting platform for data within a company where it comes from like the source into this platform and then it goes across and operations pulls it out and then puts it back in and then accounting pulls it out and puts it back in without needing to like transfer it from spreadsheet to spreadsheet to spreadsheet. That type of automation is pretty key for ensuring quality and confidence within the organization. When different emission factors come into play or different calculations come into play, like my example earlier, oil and gas, like they can't automate much. I mean, they're so complicated. And so that's one end of the spectrum. And along the way to that, like it gets risky as some of these tools are trying to perform some of those nuanced parts of the process. So now that said, I mean, we're all hearing about how great AI is and they're going to take over jobs altogether. So I'm sure some of that can be handled at some point. But from our perspective with these tools as a verifier, we have an old adage that we say to ourselves and we also tell clients when necessary that we can't verify a black box. So, you know, some of these tools, you can't really see what's happening in there. And we have to then ask for them to share with us some of the data that's inside it. And we have ways of like performing calculations on the front end data to see what comes out the other side and make sure like we can sample that way. But yeah, for anybody out there who's considering building tools, just make sure your tools are verifiable because you have to have access. The verifiers have to have access to the right information to be able to verify. So, understandably, your clients are not going to want to see all that stuff They may ask to see it for quality control. But yeah, you want to have visibility to what's happening in there. You can't have a full on black box.
I wanted to jump from talking about just greenhouse gas accounting to actually something that might be a little bit more personal. But as you alluded to, you and your wife have decided to really uh, take this jump into being full time travelers. So I wanted to ask, you're not retired, you're still working, and now you're getting a chance to travel around the world. And right now, I understand, we're talking to you while you're in Vietnam. What does that actually look like day to day? How do you structure your time between client commitments and then also experiencing the places that you're visiting? What's been the experience like of continuing to be a GHG consultant and really structuring things so that you can be a full time traveler as well?
Yeah. So the client work takes precedence over the personal and travel stuff. But there's parts of the travel that are critical and can't move around once they're set, like the actual travel days, where you're relocated. And then also, like, if it works, I'll try and give those first 2 or 3 days on the ground to go explore. We've been doing this over a year now, and I'm getting acclimated to, getting the time zones right relatively quickly. But the other part of that is the way we've designed our life. We're slow traveling. We're typically there for a month or two. And so that allows us to explore the place slowly over that whole time and not feel like we need to be out there, every day doing things. We're working, we're living and working, getting to know the culture, trying to learn the language, the food, and everything. And you're just experiencing it, soaking it up slowly while working and having our careers that we're working on.
Well, I can speak for myself and probably many listeners that we very happy to live vicariously through your experience. I wanted to ask you and your wife Kathy, you've been documenting your travels at Good Life Road, your blog and YouTube channel. What motivated you to share this journey publicly and what's the response been from other sustainability professionals who see what you're doing?
We've had this vision for a long time. And I'd say, like, we've been talking about it for like 15 years, and we've been building tools and just getting ourselves oriented with this perspective. And so we've learned a lot and figured a lot out along the way. And we thought that, having a YouTube channel and a website would be helpful to help others learn how to do what we've figured out. So supporting others to try and navigate the lifestyle that they're building for themselves. And then there's a business component to it too. And that part's really neat for me. Working in the impact space for my entire career and feeling like you're having an impact, you're not just like another cog in the wheel, has been really special. I'm sure you feel it too, Aaron, and a lot of people who are listening to this. So we're creating this content and rolling it out to our community and building the community and helping them learn how to live a lifestyle is like having a little mini impact business. Our goal is to help others and also build a business around it. And so, yeah, it's been really fun. And we're still in the relative early days, but it's growing. It's growing over time slowly. We're iterating like our clients do.
Well, I think it's pretty amazing. And just want to say I'm quite impressed to follow your travels and see where you are in the world. I was going to move into the closing sequence and wanted to jump into the implementation minute. Imagine that a listener is hearing this. It's Monday morning. They're on their way to work. What's one thing that they should do when they get to their desk? Something that takes 30 minutes or less and really helps either their GHG inventory management or their career.
I think policy and understanding where policy is going is something that a lot of people don't give attention to in their career. And I think it can really be a game changer. Whether you're like fresh out of college or, senior manager in an organization, like I recommend thinking about the field that you're in and the regulations that matter and the standards that might matter for you, and taking some time to research what's happening in that space from a policy perspective and what's coming down the pike, what's changing, what's being revised. All industries, policies changing all the time. And having insight into that part of the process, like I said, no matter where you are in your career, it's going to give you a seat at the table whether it be just conversation over coffee or a beer with colleagues or with clients. It can really help move things forward for you and move them in a really interesting direction. And then try and like circle back every week or every month and just kind of check in on things to keep you fresh.
I'd really like that advice to look at the larger landscape. I also wanted to ask if you have a resource you'd recommend our audience checks out, whether it's related to GHG accounting or designing a more flexible career.
You said to keep this in mind coming in, and we are on a podcast here. And so, in the spirit of podcasts, one of my favorite ones I found many years ago and really comes into play during COP, but is good all year round. It's a podcast, and its name is Outrage Plus Optimism semicolon the climate podcast. And it's got this three cast of characters, two guys and a woman. The woman Stefiana, I'm not sure I remember her name specifically, but she headed up the COP one year. I think it might have even been the Paris one. And so they're kind of policy wonk, and they're tracking what's happening all around the world. They're tracking what's happening with governments like the U.S. nowadays, and they're talking about it. And they bring on guests, and not always though. Sometimes there's enough going on for them to just kind of banter and talk about things. So that one I recommend. I think people would enjoy.
Thank you. I'm going to check that out myself. Before we wrap up, I wanted to give another quick thank you to North Star Carbon and Impact for supporting this podcast. If you're looking for an easier, more transparent way to manage carbon and ESG data and prepare for audits, reporting, and decarbonization planning, visit northstarcarbon.com to learn more or request a demo. Derek, where can our listeners connect with you and follow your travels at Good Life Road?
We've got our YouTube channel. It's Good Life Road. That's the name of the channel. We have a website, goodliferoad.com.
Great. Well, I'm excited to see where your adventures take you next. I want to thank you again, Derek, for joining us today. And to all of our listeners, if this episode was valuable to you, please share your biggest takeaway on LinkedIn and tag us so we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much for listening.